There's a reason why men today suck with women, especially when it comes to closing on a first date or the first time that you hang out with a girl. And here's why. You see, most men today, they come into the dating scene with their cup already full. What I mean by that is they think they already know everything. They've seen every Hollywood romantic comedy movie. They've talked to all the women who say they want a nice guy who can make her laugh. They've seen women talk about how so many guys are assholes and douchebags, and so they take all this material and it fills up their cup. And then they wonder why they can't get a girl to sleep with them on the first date or even sooner than the first date. And so coming in this video, your cup is likely already full. And I want to tell you how to actually start closing with women. But before we get there, the first thing you got to do is you got to empty your cup, so we can start off with a clean slate. Now, if you've ever experienced the type of situation that I described where your date with a girl ends very platonically, nothing really ever comes of it, and there's an obvious lack of sexual tension there, there's a vast number of reasons why that might be occurring, but I want to talk about one of the most pressing reasons why there's a lack of sexual tension. Even if you guys can verbally be flirting with each other, you guys are teasing each other, you're busting each other's chops, there's a lot of emotional chemistry between you guys. One of the main reasons why there's a lack of sexual tension is there's a lack of physical touch. Now, one of the biggest limiting beliefs that a lot of guys have is they think that it's somehow more respectable or noble of you to be a guy who withholds your sexual urges early on. Some guys may even believe that women are just not as into sex as guys are, and because of this, they think, okay, if I just don't try to have sex with her or I wait to break the touch barrier with her, then it'll show her that I'm a gentleman. And they think that this is a good strategy for success. And if that's been your strategy up to this point, I have to ask you, how's that working out for you? Bruh. Chances are, if it was working, then you wouldn't be here watching this video right now. So let's talk about a few of the ways that I recommend breaking the touch barrier and then escalating it physically to where the touch is natural, but it also turns her on and may even get her making the first move on you that very night. So the first thing I want you to understand is how to break the touch barrier and where to break the touch barrier. And it all comes down to a phrase that I call zones of escalation. And so here's what a zone of escalation is. It's if you imagine yourself standing like this with your arms spread out and you're standing up tall, if you imagine a midline going down the center of your body or even her body, well, that midline obviously passes through all your vital organs, your lungs, your heart, your stomach, your reproductive organs, etc. And so what I want you to take away from this is the closer to the midline, the more intimate, the further away from the midline, the less intimate. And so when you break the touch barrier with a girl, what you want to do is start breaking the touch barrier further out from the midline, and then over the course of the date or the interaction, escalate the touches by working your way towards the midline. And one of those unspoken rules about zones of escalation is if she's currently comfortable with you touching, let's say, as far as her arm, so you can touch her hand all the way down to her arm, and she's okay with you doing that, you can go back and touch her arm without having to work your way in again. She's now more comfortable with you just touching her in more intimate parts of her body. And this is kind of the low-key strategy to slowly escalating physically throughout the night in a way that slowly turns her on, because the closer towards the midline you get, the more she starts to think about sex, the more she starts to imagine sex with you potentially, and the more that sexual tension is there in a way where sex can actually occur. But at the end of the day, this all comes down to the understanding that sex is not bad, touching girls is not bad, and actually this is what women respond to, and women love sex just as much as guys do. Don't fall into the trap of thinking that women just aren't as into sex as guys are. In fact, they're probably more into it than you can even imagine. So now that you understand zones of escalation, now I want you to think, okay, well, how do I actually work my way in towards the midline? Just remember this one sentence: 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I'll give you an example so you can imagine this. Let's say I go to shake a girl's hand. Well, obviously on that zones of escalation diagram, the hands are the least intimate part of your body. You can shake hands with guys, with girls, with business prospects, anything like that. And obviously shaking hands is a social construct of conveying that you guys know, like, and trust each other at least enough to shake someone's hands. It's how people make deals. It's how people meet each other, right? So shaking hands is obviously the first step to breaking the touch barrier with any girl. But how do you make this to where it's not a platonic handshake? You take it a little 1 step further, all right? So 1 step further is, if we remember, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So 1 step forward is shaking her hand. Then another step forward would be holding the handshake and making dominant yet relaxed, seductive eye contact with her, all right? Now, this is a handshake that you would tend to see between a guy and a girl who are sexually interested in each other, potentially, right? And so this is obviously early on in the interaction. So that's 2 steps forward. If I went another step forward and try to give her a hug, that might be a little bit too much. It might put some girls off and it might feel like you're a little overbearing, all right? So in that case, you want to take the touch away first, one step backwards. So shake her hand, hold the extended handshake. Now I end the handshake first. I'm taking one step back, but now she's comfortable with me at least touching her hand. So later on, if I wanted to say, hey, come with me, I like the music better over there, and I'm just moving us to a different physical spot inside of this venue, I can grab her by the hand and lead her that way. That's okay, because now there's an unspoken contract between us that says I'm okay at least with us touching hands. Any further than that, not quite there yet. So over the course of the night, again, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So let's say she says something about being from Texas, and you say, oh, you're from Texas? Meaning Texas girls, we never seem to get along. And you give her a playful nudge on the arm. Well, that playful nudge on the arm is a subtle touch that you can give her, but it's 1 step past where you already were. And then maybe she says something else and you give her a one-armed hug. So how do you progress this throughout the night? So let's say you guys are talking and she says that she's really into football, and you say, no way, you're into football? I never meet girls who are into football. High five. And you go to give her a high five, she's already gonna naturally give you a high five because she's already comfortable with you guys touching hands. So that's 1 step forward, and then you hold the handshake and maybe you pull her in for a one-armed hug. All right, so that's 2 steps forward. And this is just a hypothetical example here. And then you end the hug first and you say, all right, that's enough, get off me. You push her away. That's 1 step back. You can see every time you go to break the touch barrier, you take 2 slow steps forward and then you take 1 step back in a way where you're almost the one dictating who's escalating on who at this point. And slowly but surely, she's becoming more and more comfortable with you being in her bubble and breaking that touch barrier with her and actually touching her in the first place. So just with those 2 examples alone, you went from not having touched her to now she's okay with you shaking hands with her, holding her hand, giving her high fives, and now she's okay with you giving her at least a one-armed hug. You can see with this process, there's only so much further that you can go before you guys are actually back somewhere doing the bang, bang, diggity, diggity. Giggity, 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 ooh, ee, ooh, ah, ah. So you understand zones of escalation. You kind of understand 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Just start paying more attention to this in your interactions. Now, the third thing I want you to understand is the yes, no, and neutral responses. These are where guys completely fuck up. So let's say you go to escalate with a girl and you don't really know if she's okay with you continuing to escalate, or maybe she's a little bit uncomfortable. So all you have to really be looking for is the yes, no, and neutral responses. Very simple to read. The no response is basically, let's say you go to give her a hug and she kind of leans away from the hug and she kind of looks disgusted on her face, or she actually tells you, don't touch me. In that case, that's a clear no response, and in which case, ease off a little bit and then just slowly start working your way in. On the zones of escalation, give her a little bit of space for a second. All right, so that's a no response, but obviously you want to be building up enough sexual tension there with your banter, with your words, with the conversation, to where the physical touch just becomes an extension of the sexual tension in the interaction, if that makes sense. So that's a no response. The yes response is the exact opposite. Let's say you go to give her a hug, she leans into it, she looks happy that you're giving her a hug, she may even start giggling. That's a yes response, and it means that you can actually proceed. All right, if there's a line right here and you go to touch her and it spikes the tension up too much to where if you go past the line, she's like, whoa, ease off. Well, that line is like, you almost want to be tiptoeing that line, because that was the line to draw an emotional reaction out of her, to where you saw either a no response or a yes response. Which brings me to the third type of response, which is the neutral response here. And the neutral response is you go to touch her and she doesn't react positively or negatively one way or the other. In that case, what do? This right here is where I see a lot of guys tend to get in their own heads, get confused, and it basically comes down to, if you go to touch a girl and she's not responding negatively and she's not responding positively, it simply means that on this line right here, if you escalate and you start touching her, if you go past the line, you'll get the no response. If you go up to the line or near the line, you'll probably get a positive response because you haven't crossed it, but you did enough to get an emotional reaction out of her. But if you didn't do a very big touch, or she was kind of unfazed by it, then you're not really going to get much of a response out of her. Let's say she's comfortable with you hugging her. Well, if you just kind of nudge her on the arm playfully and she doesn't respond positively or negatively one way or the other, it just means that you could probably have escalated it a little bit further. Me personally, I like to be able to spark emotions in an interaction with a girl. When I'm bantering with her, I want to get some sort of reaction out of her, whether it's positive or negative, because no reaction is probably the worst type of reaction, because it means that you're not good at spiking emotions, or whatever you didn't spike a strong enough emotion to get a response out of her. And oftentimes, if I'm approaching a girl or if I'm first talking talking to a girl, I would rather have her responding with some type of emotion, because emotions are like momentum. Once you get an emotion, you can actually work with that. But a girl who's indifferent, a girl who just doesn't care, that's where you know that you can actually kind of push the pedal a little bit further to get some type of response out of her. That way you know if you can actually be progressing this and escalating this a little bit further or not. So when you go to touch a girl, start looking for how is she responding? Yes, no, or neutral. If you're getting a yes or a neutral response, then yeah, escalate it one step further and see if you get another response out of her. And remember, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. As soon as you get a no response, don't take it personally. Don't take it as rejection. Don't get up in your head. Don't get dejected. Don't get sad. Don't start crying. All right. Just take it as this is a little bit too much, too fast, and take 1 step back, ease off a little bit, and try again a little bit later after some more conversation and comfort building. And if you like this video, then I highly recommend you check out this one right here, because this one thing makes you 78% more attractive when you actually understand this with no effort at all. Go check it out, and I'll see you in the next video.